Interesting. Let's get the Indian perspective. Raj Chengappa, is this possibly the most awaited US presidential election in years, given the personality of Donald Trump in particular?
Well, certainly he's been a divisive figure, both domestically and internationally. And the outcome of it will determine in many senses not just America's future, but also the way the world deals with the international order or disorder at the moment. And to me, I think one of the most important things is also to look at whether this, whoever's elected president tomorrow also wins the Senate, because they also up for grabs, 35 seats up for grabs, and who will get the majority of the Senate is very important, whether Republican or Democrats.
What does it mean for us here in India?
Well, certainly, depending on who you're talking about, that one, if it is Biden, right, which we are familiar with Biden as well as we've dealt with Trump, he will be seen as a restorationist figure. In many senses, if Trump was disruptive, he's a unifier in some senses. In the sense his slogan has been, I will put America back at the head table and I'll have your back as well. Which means that all the international agreements that Trump broke, he's going to restore in many senses. He's going to be all the institutions, multilateral institutions, whether it's the WHO, and of course agreements like the Paris climate change is going to come back. And for India, if you look at it, we've got a sweet spot in many senses. There's bipartisan support, and if you look at the tripod of issues that India puts forward, whether it's the strategic part, which is the defense part, and China, Biden has called China a thug. And Trump has also hit at him. Now, if you take a look at trade, which is where I think our weakest point has been with Trump, maybe Biden won't push that much because it's going to be, both the presidents will be highly internally focused. And finally, if you look at value systems, I think that's where we need to get Trump gave us a pass when it came to religious intolerance or the fact Kashmir or other kinds of issues, the CAA. But in this thing, they could both focus on that. So if you look at three legs of the, are the key issues that are there, defense is our strongest. We have seen the Malabar exercises going on right now. Trade is where we're shaky, and value system, we need to work on that to ensure that no president fixes us.
How is South Bloc looking at this election? Is this election being seen, given the amount of time we've invested with Donald Trump's presidency? Let's be honest, a year ago, Donald Trump looked like he was in for a re-election. Now we are saying the poll of polls show Donald Trump could well lose. How is South Bloc seeing what's happening in America at the moment?
Well, Rajdeep, South Bloc, the Ministry of External Affairs not only engaged Donald Trump, because you see the kind of, it's a rare feat to see Donald Trump, Prime Minister Modi, get along so well with a Trump who's not gotten along with any of the world leaders. So that in itself was an achievement. And yes, India did try to encash on that, never forgetting, meanwhile, that there is the Democratic Party that India needs to engage. And so if you look at the mission and the Ministry of External Affairs, they have engaged both sides. They haven't left out the Democratic side, be it visible, that matter, engagements abroad. But historically, in the near history, Rajdeep, it is almost known that Republicans have been better for India in terms of ties. If you go back in the recent India-US history.
In a way, would you agree that that's changed, that there's a bipartisan consensus emerging? Let me take that to my two diplomats. They can perhaps answer this. In a way, Geeta is suggesting that Republicans have traditionally in recent times been better for India. KC Singh, does that still hold?
Well, yes, if you're starting with George W. Bush, but certainly we also remember Nixon. So there have been problems in the past, but since George W. Bush, it's been a different game. And there's been continuity, continuously we built on the relationship, but also there is a danger of this personalized diplomacy with Trump, because you had Howdy Modi, very clearly a way to influence the diaspora vote in Texas, and we know what impact it has had because early reports coming in are saying that probably 70% of the Indian diaspora is still voting for the Democrats. Then you had, of course, the event in Ahmedabad, which again was so close to the US election in the election year. Normally you don't invite a US president over. And then we've just had a 2+2 just weeks before the election. So we can talk of continuity, and don't forget also the spat that the External Affairs Minister had with Jayapal, Congresswoman, where she was supported by Kamala Harris. So on democracy, human rights, issues like that, we can't just ignore it. I think they are going to be up front. They'll be there on the table. So it'll be a mixed blessing. On some things we'll get a let, on trade we'll have probably an easier way, but then it also depends how Biden rebalances US relations with China. We can talk of the Quad, we can talk of pushing it, but how much push is there? Because when Quad started in 2007, I led the first delegation when it was created. But very soon after that, the Americans lost interest in it. Abe was no longer Prime Minister, the Japanese lost interest. So the Quad itself, the future will depend on whether Biden wants to openly confront, like Pompeo stand here and openly confront China, or to engage China and therefore do a very subtle containment.
Let me also get in. You know, we've got lots of voices today, so let me get in Ashok Sajanar, who's been waiting patiently, former diplomat. Your take on this, who's better for India at the moment, Trump or a Biden win?
Well, you know, Rajdeep, I will tend to go with what you had said, and I think what Geeta also mentioned, that, you know, there is a bipartisan consensus, and that has been there in Washington for the last 20 years, you know, ever since Clinton came to India in March 2000. After that, irrespective of who has occupied the White House, whether it's a Republican or a Democrat, you know, our relations have followed an upward trajectory. You can see with Mr. Trump, you know, he went out of a large number of international agreements. Also in terms of bilateral relations, there were a large number of changes. But as far as relations with India are concerned, they went up. So this is the macro picture. So whoever comes, Trump, of course, he's known. We have, Prime Minister Modi has worked with him. They have a good understanding. But if as bilateral issues are concerned at a macro level.
Right.
Now, coming to some of the specifics, you know, as some of the other people have mentioned, if I could very quickly sort of, you know, tick some of them. You know, for instance, as far as the climate change accord is concerned, what Biden has said that he's going to rejoin it. I think that's going to be very helpful and very useful for us. As far as the Iranian deal is concerned, that is going to be very helpful as far as the Chabahar project is concerned. I think what Biden will really bring to the table if he were to get elected is to bring greater stability in terms of not only bilateral relations, but relations across the globe. And there'll be greater predictability. The alliances, they will tend to get much stronger.